Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go merrily deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the naughty or nice list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam, the merry provocateur, bringing the competence.
Someone had to.
That's right. That's right.
And speaking of competence, and also talking about like, debts paid, I think as well. It's and presents in the spirit of giving in this time of year. We're bringing back two gents this week who we gave a really short hand last time. They joined us for Men in Black International of all films. Unfortunately,
A real coal in the stocking. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think without further ado, our guests this week, Mr. Liam Dempsey and Mr. Matt Brothers. Gents, how are you both doing?
Yes, well, ho, 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 Merry Spymas from all of us here at Spocklight.
Doing very well, guys. Doing very well.
Well, I mean, in terms of your podcasts, I was going to introduce them. I mean, there's a few. You've got a fleet of them.
Mass.
Between the two of you. Yeah, just a... Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, Spocklight is the podcast that connects the two of you, which we've been on a couple of times ourselves, talking about Star Trek and our mutual love of Star Trek.
Yeah, you've both been on.
Yeah. And, of course, Matt, we've been on... Is Paul Dano okay?
You have.
To talk about Night and Daddy, our only ever Tom Cruise film. We've still never spoken about him on the show.
I still can't believe I beat you guys to it in getting to some cruise spy action, and it's wonderful to be able to link up you guys with a thematic film such as that on that run of Dano filmography rundowns.
I'm incredibly confused. You've not done any of the Mission Impossibles yet?
No, because the whole thing was, we knew that there's only so many lightning rod franchises that people are going to tune in for. Right? So we have the James Bond stuff that's ongoing, and we couldn't burn through both like at the same time, right? We need years built onto this podcast. So the Johnny Englishes aren't going to sustain listeners the way that, say, the Mission Impossibles will. Or Duncan Jacks or something like that. So we need those Mission Impossibles. But we realized, I think it was maybe after doing the Paul Dano show and talking about Night and Day, that like that is a real gap in what we've covered, which is Tom Cruise. Like we've done War of the Worlds on the Patreon, but we have scheduled early in the new year that finally Tom Cruise will make an appearance on Spy Hards.
Well, that's it. You can slowly start to ease into him through stuff like Night and Day before even getting to the big MI franchise.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely.
Space them out.
Yeah. We've got time. There's lots of spy films to talk about, and we've got a very special one this week. But gents, just in the meantime, what's been going on with both of you since you were last on the show? I mean, we'll start with you, Matt. What's been happening?
It's been crazy. So me and Liam and Paul as well have been doing lots of Spocklighting as we go. We're prepping our own Christmas episode to come, which is always a tricky endeavor with Spocklight, as there's never really any direct Christmas related Star Trek thing. So finding something to tie in every year is always a fun task, and we got something very fun this time around, which we'll be doing very soon. And over on Is Paul Dano Okay, we've just finished our first other actor miniseries. We did a short run of episodes looking at Judy Grier, who kind of also falls into that space of well known by face, not always by name, by her work and everything, character actor. So we've just finished a little run of 8 episodes and a bonus on Judy Grier before we head back to the last drips of the well of Paul Dano's filmography, which will be capped off with a few remaining things we have and his new film with Steven Spielberg, The Fabelmans, for early next year, before we go back into hiding, before coming back with another different character actor for another different mini-season.
And what about you, Liam?
I mean, just to follow up on Spocklight, Matt is completely correct that we have a very special Christmas special coming this year, actually suggested by a listener. Someone emailed us into the Spocklight email. Literally just, so a random listener who suggested a particular film that would be good for a Christmas special. So we give the listeners what they want, and we are going to do that film on the Christmas special this year. I won't reveal what the film is, but I will reveal it's actually a TV movie and it stars Sir Patrick Stewart. So we shall see, and it isn't his version of the Christmas Carol, because we've already done that for our first ever Christmas special.
For our sins.
So yeah.
For our punishment.
I mean, well, fucking hell, it was better than Christmas Eve with Patrick Stewart, which we did for our second Christmas special.
Oh God, was that as well?
Christ,
that's
almighty.
what I'm thinking
Yeah,
of.
no, we did. His Christmas Carol was his Shakespeare in comparison to Christmas Eve. Fuck me.
There's only one Star Trek movie I think that ties in, which is Generations, but I don't even think there's an episode that ties into Christmas, is there?
There's no Christmas special of Star Trek, which is absolutely outrageous. On our first Christmas special for Spocklight, we actually ran through all the Christmas references in Star Trek. There are quite a few, like over the years. There is, like you say, Generations. There's the kind of dream sequence in like the Nexus in that. There's a scene in an original series episode where there's a flashback with Kirk about to go to a Christmas party. There's a scene in Voyager where there's a Christmas tree with like a Voyager Christmas toy like in the Christmas tree, and there's a few other bits and pieces, but it is few and far between. And there's never been like
it's scraping the barrel, isn't it?
Christmas special of Star Trek, so we have to find other avenues. So we did the Patrick Stewart Christmas Carol TV movie for our first one. We did Christmas Eve, which is the Patrick Stewart starring kind of Christmas film, which is kind of like faith-based Christmas film, with it's kind of like Valentine's Day and New Year's Eve, those kind of films, but a really, really cheapo faith-based version. And we also did Batman and Robin 1 year as well, which was great stuff, which of course written by Akiva Goldsman, who's one of the main architects behind kind of New Track on TV at the moment, which was great fun. We didn't get to do one last year, but we are back this year with a new Christmas special, which I'm very excited about.
Has it been 2 years since Batman and Robin?
Yeah, that was 2020.
My God.
Yeah. First year in lockdown, Bowie. And I'm really, really excited about doing another Christmas special. We're going to be doing that one in person as well, because we couldn't do Batman and Robin in person because it was all lockdown time then. Because I love Christmas, guys. I was honoured to be invited onto your Christmas special. But since we last came on to Men in Black International, I suppose the big happening in all our lives in terms of the world of spice, which you explore on this podcast, given that our episode Men in Black International went out in March last year, is of course No Time to Die. With spoilers, this is a spoiler alert, so you've got no excuse to kind of shout your mouth off after I've said this, where James Bond dies. Like, I mean, that's a pretty big event in the spy world. Probably the biggest event there could be in the spy world, surely.
It certainly was something. I think the Bond fandom is still in the wake of that event, and there's often spats online about whether it was a good idea or not. I mean, I've already put my 2 cents into it. I couldn't care. Kill him, because he'll just come back anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that was where I sat as well. It's like it was a pretty closed arc on the entire Bond era for that Craig had there, so like I don't have a particular issue with it. I think my main concern is like, let's just not repeat it again.
Yes, yeah. Don't do another trilogy with a new actor and then kill him again at the end, and that become the thing. Like you say, it's that thing of like, well, basically, Bond's already dead before this, because this kind of Casino Royale started a whole new timeline. Like, that wasn't a prequel, as we now know. It literally started like a whole new thing, basically. So, the Bond that we've been following before in 20 films, you're kind of like, well, he's basically dead. So, literally, who cares? Doesn't matter. Like, unless we get into the whole, did all the other Bond films happen between Quantum and Skyfall? Like,
no, please, God, no.
Listen,
please, God, no.
How much Christmas cheer do you have in you right now? Because it sounds like you've got quite a lot. And I will say, in speaking of Christmas, to some people, the fact that Daniel Craig's James Bond is dead is the best Christmas present they could have ever received.
Fucking hell.
He was not to me. I really love the guy, but there's a lot of people that really wish he was never James Bond. So Merry Christmas to you folks. I don't think you're listening, but hey ho. And yeah, we speak about Men in Black International, and hopefully we've got something better for you this time. And Cam, I think you have something wrapped. It looks quite big on your lap for these guys. What is it?
Yes, we are tackling 1989's The Package, starring Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones, directed by Andrew Davis.
Look at the size of it. That's a massive package.
That's right.
So we compiled a list a while ago of all of the Christmas spy movies. And we've done a couple ourselves so far. We did The Long Kiss Goodnight, our first Christmas, and then we did On Her Majesty's Secret Service last year. And we thought, how do we top On Her Majesty's Secret Service?
Yeah.
Gene Hackman.
Done.
It's what you do. All-time high. All-time high. Well, the usual question I ask at this point is, what's everyone's previous experience with this film? I think I could guess everyone's, but I've never heard of it until I reviewed this film. Anyone else had ever heard of it?
No, never. Literally never heard of it. It was one of those ones. You mentioned it. I had to look it up. Me, it was like, oh, Gene Hackman, Tommy Lee Jones, Andrew Davis. Okay, but I knew the people involved once I looked it up. But yeah, no, I'd never heard of this film.
I think it's one of those ones that falls into that late 80s, early 90s period where there's a lot of these kind of post-Cold War spy thrillery espionage action stuff of this ilk, and Gene Hackman as well. He was having a great run of things around this time as well, but somehow I'd never come across this on my radar either. This is it, and it's great to see that Andrew Davis went on immediately doing Under Siege and then The Fugitive. Like, that's a pretty great run for early 90s sort of real adult action director.
Yeah, I mean, I was not familiar with this movie at all. I remember when I stumbled across it. I can't remember. I think, Scott, you messaged it to me and were like, oh, add this to the list. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, why have I not heard of it? Because I know, even if I haven't seen them, I know the Gene Hackman movies of this era. Stuff like, Class Action or Narrow Margin. I haven't seen these movies, but I'm aware of them, and I probably will watch them at some point in the future. So, like, this one was a real, like, huh? And then Andrew Davis, I was very familiar with because of, The Fugitive and Under Siege and even Above the Law. So it was a real, like, head scratcher as to why I hadn't heard of this movie. And actually last night I was up visiting my parents, who would have been in their, like late mid-30s sort of thing when this movie came out. And I asked them, I would be quite young, but I asked them, like, at the time, did you see this movie, on home video or on TV? And neither one of them had ever heard of it.
Some films are really those ones that's like, does this exist? Have we all just collectively imagined this? Because you tell people, you're like, it sounds like one we should know about.
Yeah.
The package was empty. There was nothing inside.
It doesn't look like it was a box office success from looking at it. So,
No,
that would explain.
We'll dig into that in a second. I think what I'll do, because I imagine a lot of the listeners, when they saw this as their Christmas film, were like, huh? As well. But I will say, I posted about this on Twitter the other day that we were covering this film. And I got a lot of responses of people saying it's like a hidden gem of Andrew Davis's work. And really praising Gene Hackman. Liam, I think you actually like jumped in on the tweet as well and saw some of the replies. There was people that had seen this film. So I think the spy fans of the world do kind of looked at this film as a good Christmas example. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
It feels like a movie that, if I had seen it on TV, would have had a bit of an impact back in the day. But it just didn't seem to show on a channel that I was frequenting. But I can completely understand it that there's people out there who would have stumbled across it in that way and probably seen it a few times on TV.
I mean, Cam, you're just usually on the Playboy channel 3 hour most of the time, and then
the scrambled version.
yeah, as well will ever find you on TV.
It's one of those films that feels like a real paradox where you're right, it feels like a very TV movie in the sense of it's one you would have seen late night on TV at some point, but it still feels very much like a film. Like the copy I rented off of iTunes was like a scan of an old 35mm print. It must have been because there was film grain, there was flicker. It was great. It was like having my own little private screening. And films of this era just look great. They look better than stuff today. So it's one that feels and looks like a proper film, but that I would just imagine would be forever repeated on TV, but not when I was watching.
Yeah, I should say that I rented the 88 Films Blu-ray for this. 88 Films, obviously, they're one of the really nice boutique Blu-ray companies that are about now. And yeah, they released this on Blu-ray, and I get the feeling it might have perhaps been in their earlier days of kind of releasing Blu-rays, maybe, and maybe it's just kind of a license they could pick up. But they do put it out, and it was a reasonably vanilla disc, but it was a nice kind of Blu-ray transfer of it. And usually, like all those boutique Blu-ray companies tend to pick out films that they kind of want to release, that they feel like kind of like you say, slightly hidden gem kind of films. And so obviously, I think there are people out there who really rate this picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, firstly, the first thing to announce in terms of more Christmas presents, along with this conversation, is later this week, on the Thursday, not the Friday. We're going to give it a little bit of time because Christmas Day is quite shortly afterwards. We're actually speaking to Mr. Andrew Davis himself.
Whoa!
I mean, that is amazing. That
is a present. That's the real package.
Yeah.
That is it's a big
the real
one.
package is the friendships we made along the way. Andrew Davis.
I'm sure Davis's package is massive.
You just got to unwrap it.
I have no doubt about it. But yeah, check that out on Thursday. I mean, this film as well we'll get into, but he's done some of the best movies of the 90s and late 80s, so it's going to be a fantastic conversation, so tune in for that. But if you have never heard of The Package, here is your letterboxd.com synopsis. The Package. He's one man racing against time to stop the most explosive conspiracy in history. Experienced Green Beret Sergeant Johnny Gallagher is escorting a prisoner, airborne Ranger Thomas Boyer, back to the US. But Boyer escapes, and Gallagher must risk life and limb to catch him. Perfect.
It sort of is, but it's also like that's the very clear reading as to what happens, but the movie is far more murky in its storytelling intentionally than what that synopsis would communicate.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Well, Cam, it's about time we got a haircut, we shaped up, and we be the best that we could be. Let's talk about the behind the scenes of The Package. How did it get so big?
So yeah, there's going to be a lot of those puns, I feel like, throughout this episode. But
I'm living for it.
It's funny, we talk about how none of us had really heard of this movie, and it seems like, when you start to dive into the making of this movie, like in terms of what's out there for resources, very thin. This is not one where there's like a well-chronicled behind-the-scene account on what was going on with The Package.
Nobody wants a thin package.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on. So the writer of this movie was John Bishop. He was born in 1929, and he was a playwright who had scored a couple successes on Broadway, starting with 1977's The Trip Back Down. He did not start working into film until well into his life. Like, it wasn't until 1984 where he had a credit on 2 episodes of Comedy Zone, a TV show I'm not particularly familiar with. And then he only had 2 films. He did The Package, following up those 2 TV episodes, and then closed out his film writing career with 1994's Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, a movie I have seen. It was a pretty fun movie. He was more known in that era for being sort of a punch-up writer and doing rewrite work on movies such as Clear and Present Danger or Beverly Hills Cop 3. Clearly, someone you could bring in on these sort of action-oriented films, but not someone with a huge filmography, which I thought was quite interesting.
It's always interesting to hear about those writers that have these really short filmographies, but you just sort of find their fingerprints in all these sorts of films. Don McPherson is another one that we've spoken to in the past that had a very long career, but if you look on his filmography, it's like 10 entries.
We've also come across a few playwrights who had very short filmographies, but were very well established, Broadway or theater people.
Yeah, definitely. From what I could see, he was mostly a playwright. and a kind of slight script doctor for a short time. Also saw he did some rewrites on Primal Fear as well, which is another kind of big movie. But yeah, it does feel like he was a playwright primarily. I think that kind of does sort of lean into the package. It's quite a dialogue heavy film at the end of the day. A lot of although there is action in the film, there is a lot of kind of dialogue in the movie. So definitely you can kind of tell he comes from a playwright background, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this movie was fast tracked really quick. Apparently, like it was 1 year between receiving the script that they went into principal photography. So we talk about some movies where like the script is going through various, evolutions over a like consistently large number of years, but this was not the case with this movie. And Andrew Davis, we mentioned him earlier. So I think everyone knows him for The Fugitive, which was like his big smash hit in 1993. But he got his start in 1969 as a assistant camera operator on the Robert Forster film Medium Cool. And then he just went on to do a bunch of different jobs. He was a writer, cinematographer, and he became a director in 1978 with the movie Stony Island, which I had never seen. It's about two jazz musicians on the road. And then he kind of dabbled. He did a horror movie called The Final Terror, and then really kind of made his name doing the Chuck Norris movie Code of Silence. And then he rolled that into the Seagal movie Above the Law. And then it was like this streak of like hit movies like Under Siege, The Fugitive. He did A Perfect Murder later in his career, and Disney's Holes was a reasonably sized hit as well. A reasonably sized hole, I guess. Holes in packages, people. Holes in packages.
That was Cam. That wasn't me. I'll add, everyone.
That's true.
Cam, I've got to say, you've skipped Chain Reaction.
Yeah.
Now that was a big one. I saw Chain Reaction at the cinema, which is Keanu Reeves and Morgan Freeman. Where Keanu's at his kind of like biggest, kind of like here, and I see coming off Speed like a year later. Like, yeah, I remember seeing this
coming
movie.
Off Speed. Was he all right?
I remember seeing this flick in the cinema, and it is.
Please tell me you reviewed it for your newspaper at the time.
I didn't. I wish I had, because then there'd be an existing review of me giving it 9 out of 10 at the time.
Can you do a letterbox list of every film in the mid-90s you did a newspaper review for as a kid?
Oh, I should do.
Yeah.
This is for obviously people who don't know. I've mentioned this on our podcast before. In the mid-90s, I was a junior film critic for my local paper. Like, so literally, this is when I'm like 11, 12. Girls, 13. I've been for about 2 years. I got sent to see like press screenings as like a junior like film critic for all these like movies, and so somewhere there is like insane. Obviously, I'm like 11, 12 at the time, so I'm giving like insane ratings to some films. So there's a 10 out of 10 Batman and Robin review.
Yes.
Time proved you correct on that one.
Funny enough, one of the films I saw was a press screen was Star Trek First Contact.
Oh, okay.
And with that, I gave 9 out of 10, and I'd still give it a 9 out of 10 today. It's still fucking amazing. So there you go.
My favourite TNG film. Absolutely.
Yeah, I hold with that one. But Chain Reaction, I saw around that time. I did not review it, but I do remember thinking it was fucking amazing. But now I can see it's got 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I mean, my memory may be failing me on Chain Reaction. Sadly.
One of you's like, who's right, who's wrong? Child like you, or the rest of the internet and critics?
Yeah, 88 Films, get on the Blu-ray for Chain Reaction. Like, you've got to get reevaluated.
Yeah, I remember when that one came out, because it actually had a lot of press around it, because it was like following up The Fugitive. And I recall people weren't the kindest to it at the time. I did see it on video, but it's been so long, I really don't remember much at all. But I do remember Chain Reaction definitely had... People were aware of that movie. Like, it was marketed pretty heavily at the time. But in terms of the actual production, it was really tough to find stuff. I actually managed to strike gold using the Amazon previews for a book written about Gene Hackman, where there was only a few pages available to preview, but one of those pages was the package.
Wow. Like, no one's going to be interested in this. Put this page out for free. That's fine.
Just a chapter in his memoir. Like, this will cover it. A paragraph.
And so they talked about how Gene Hackman he sort of acknowledged he was a pain on this set. He had reached a point in his career where he found it very tough to be directed and really had just no patience for...
No one directs Hackman!
Really, yes. And I had stumbled across earlier in my research a 1989 interview with Hackman on the press tour for this movie. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be gold. So I read the interview, and it's basically a full page of Hackman apologizing to the reporter for being tired and miserable. And I was like, oh, it gave me nothing. There was absolutely no content about the movie whatsoever. It was just Gene Hackman, who at the time of the press tour was also shooting Narrow Margin in Vancouver, my hometown here, and was basically like, I'm really tired from doing night shoots. I'm just really tired.
You could say that Gene Hackman was not having the most wonderful time of the year.
He was not. No. And I've heard stories of Hackman around this era. I remember Sam Raimi had a fun anecdote that Bruce Campbell recited in his first book about Quick and the Dead, where basically you had to really try to talk Gene Hackman into following any direction whatsoever. He was like gifted actor and obviously had amazing instincts because those performances come across on screen, but I don't think was the easiest to actually, get through a scene. And apparently him and Tommy Lee Jones respected each other, but did not get along. Both of them are known to be a little prickly, I think, generally.
Did he not sanction that man's buffoonery?
Yeah. And apparently Tommy Lee Jones got angry when Hackman wanted to start cutting Boyette's lines. And, if you're an actor, that's not generally something that endears you to another actor, is when they're saying, can you get rid of that guy's lines? And so apparently they did not acknowledge each other when filming wrapped. They just walked away in separate directions, and that marked the end of the shooting of the package.
But that's the thing, innit? At this time, Hackman is a bona fide star and a seasoned kind of veteran star as well, who's got real kind of respectable career, massive movies behind him like The French Connection and stuff, many others.
Oscar.
Yeah, exactly. And Tommy Lee Jones at this point, 1989, he's nothing. He's really, his career took so long to kick off. The Fugitive essentially makes him when he kind of is in that, and he's in loads of films before then. He's in Rolling Thunder in the 70s, which is a real kind of favorite of mine. I really love that movie, and he's great in it. But really, his roles are reasonably kind of small jobbing actor until he gets The Fugitive, and that's what makes him a superstar. So at this point in his career, Hackman would have held all of the power on that set, 100%.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Jones pops up in Coal Miner's Daughter as the co-lead of that movie opposite Sissy Spacek, and he's fantastic. But it doesn't seem like there was a lot of momentum getting him those leading parts after that movie, because yeah, you're right, there's a lot of crazy Tommy Lee Jones villains for the next handful of years before The Fugitive really elevates him and he gets the Oscar.
Under Siege.
Yeah, Under Siege, another crazy villain performance. Blown Away comes out,
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Davis, let's face it, he's got a lot to thank Andrew Davis for, because he cast him in this, in co-lead with Hackman. He cast him in Under Siege as the villain, and then he cast him in The Fugitive, which is completely his breakout role. So Davis is his guy, and I suppose Tommy Lee Jones is clearly his De Niro, I guess.
I remember seeing Tommy Lee Jones he pops up in Love Story, which I think is his first credit on his wiki page anyway, which is 1970. And even back then thinking, he still looks kind of old.
He does. He plays, I think a college roommate or something like that in the movie. And you're like, how did this, this elderly man get into this college campus? He would have
been 24 in that film. And it's basically a slightly smoothed version of the man you know now.
What up, fellow kids?
He actually pops up in the premiere episode of Charlie's Angels as well.
Oh, wow.
That Scott Watt and I watched. Yeah,
as the fourth angel who they kick out.
Too haggard, Jane's got fuck out.
Good morning, Charlie.
I do love this period of these kind of actors like Hackman just kind of getting to the end of their career and just taking no shit. And it sounds like Hackman did this all the way to the end, because by the time he hits Royal Tenenbaums and a couple other things nearly noughties, that's it for him, isn't it? And he retires.
Oh, wasn't he meant to be a nightmare on the Royal Tenenbaums?
Oh yeah. I think he's since apologized to Wes Anderson because poor guy, like, still super young. It's like his third film. It's like, oh my god, you're not ready for the Hackman.
No, I mean, look at Wes Anderson at the end of the day. He's like a little kind of frail scarecrow man. Like, like fucking
Yeah.
Hackman, veteran actor coming on, like booming at him, probably in like full Unforgiven mode. Like,
Wes Anderson is a Fantastic Mr. Fox stop motion puppet. That's what that's the vibe he gives.
I mean, literally, this is 3 years out from Unforgiven at the end of the day, which is one of Hackman's best performances, and it only elevates him more in terms of his kind of like absolute stuff. Because I mean, really, he's one of the acting powerhouse greats, isn't he? In terms of Hollywood actors, I mean, he's one of those people I have to remind myself that he's still alive. Because he's one of the few actors of his stature who retired and stuck to it. Like, in terms of like, I mean, it's mental to me that Welcome to Mooseport is officially his final film. But like the other day, there was like, I can't remember when it was, but there was something with him appearing at some kind of event or something like that. And he was like, oh yeah, Hackman's still fucking alive. Like, I completely forgot, because you kind of like these people genuinely do retire and then disappear from public view. You can't just go, oh, they don't exist anymore, and then you're like, oh shit, they are still. Like,
he just kind of looks like a normal granddad of like an
80-something-year-old
man. But like, it feels like him and Sean Connery did the same sort of thing, like piecing out in that early naughty space. And with Connery, of course, it was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I just love that story of him on that set of like just wanting to do one take, and him like doing a shot of him walking down the street, and then the director being like, "Let's go again." He was like, "What? Why?" He's like, "Well, for the £18 million I'm paying you, you can walk down a goddamn street." He's like, "What?"
I will never forgive Extraordinary Gentlemen for renaming itself as LXG.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, rest in peace, Kevin O'Neill, as he turns in his grave yet again at hearing that.
It's interesting that those legends, because you want to imagine that they go out on top, but like both Welcome to Mooseport and LXG, I think it's more just like they're like, I got nothing left to give.
Yeah, I've had enough.
This experience.
I'm off. Jack Nicholson as well. He's another one who's bowed out gracefully and just gone like, he made the best decision of his life when he refused to come out of retirement for Louis C.K.'s online only TV series Horace and Pete, where he offered him, I think it's Alan Arkin who ended up playing the role in that. He offered him his role and he turned him down. I'm like, good decision, Jack. Good decision. Like, rather than go out retired now, in retrospect.
Yeah. So, another trivia note I had on this one was, Tommy Lee Jones appears in JFK a couple years later, and Ike Pappas plays a reporter in this movie, and he was an actual real life reporter. He may still be alive. I'm not 100% sure. But in 1963, he was working for CBS News, and he was interviewing Lee Harvey Oswald when Jack Ruby pushed him out of the way and murdered Lee Harvey Oswald. So there's some interesting, like real world parallels between kind of this reporter in this movie in a very like volatile situation, and real life was kind of legendary for this moment.
He did actually pass away in 2008.
He did. Okay. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, Liam referred to it earlier. This movie was not a huge box office success. The budget was $16 million, and domestically it did 10.6. And there are no international numbers available, and it would not shock me if this was not widely released internationally afterwards with a performance like that domestically.
Yeah, it's hard because often you find with anything older than kind of like, 2000 or something, or even more recently in that, basically like pre-internet taking over everything, there tends to be not much information. In terms of like they used to usually have like sometimes they don't have any kind of box at all, and then often they just have the domestic but not the worldwide. I think it was like less measure. I'm sure it got a UK release in regards to, I mean, it's it's a reasonably sized film and such like that. I think it's probably just the information isn't there kind of thing and available. Like I'm just gonna have a look right now.
Imagine it doing all right down Blockbuster, on the VHS rental.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was released in the UK.
Right?
Fucking hell. I mean, this just shows how long. I remember these days when it took ages for Hollywood movies to come over here. So released in the USA in 25th August 1989, How long does it take to come to the UK? 15th of June 1990. So it's a 10-month wait
Yeah.
for the package. Like, that's fucking that's not first class, is it? That's not even fucking second class.
No one dropping spoilers online back then, you see.
I'd fire the FedEx guy if that was the thing I received. Yeah, that's not good. Not good.
So this movie landed at number 82 at the worldwide box office then for the year, between New York Stories, which was a compilation film, sort of an anthology effort involving works by Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, and Francis Ford Coppola, and then also the Sean Penn De Niro movie We're No Angels, that I feel like has been completely forgotten to time. The top three for this year: number 1 was Batman, number 2 was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and number 3 was Dead Poets Society.
Oh, that's all right. That's an all right top 3. Saw Dead Poets Society for the first time recently. It's okay. Like, wasn't particularly blown away, but I mean that's a good top 2. Batman and Indiana Jones, definitely. Yeah. I've just had a look at the old inflation calculator. So in today's money, this would have cost you almost 38.5 million. You're spending on the package today. Like, which is reason. I mean, that's the kind of film, basically, the package based on that is the kind of film that doesn't get made that much in terms of cinema release now.
That's that starry mid-budget level.
Yeah. This is Netflix. This is Netflix now. Netflix release, yeah.
Yep, totally. And just like final notes I had just to wrap up the behind the scenes. So like Andrew Davis would obviously go on and do The Fugitive in 93, which would be massive. It feels in many ways like this movie's building towards stuff like Under Siege and The Fugitive, but obviously Tommy Lee Jones's career would be catapulted as well, as we acknowledged. The last thing I noticed was there was this 2014 mini documentary called The Package, Interview with Joanna Cassidy, that I stumbled across on IMDb. Normally I don't really like talk about behind the scenes things from home video releases, but the synopsis on IMDb raised my eyebrows. It said, "Interview with Cassidy is on the hesitant side, with the actress searching for the right words to describe her time with the package and her feelings for her co-stars and Davis." And I was like, oh. Like, it sounded kind of like troubling. So I was like, I dug deeper, and I found DVD reviews of at the time, and they acknowledged this. And apparently it was just, she was very emotionally overwhelmed, talking about how much she enjoyed working on the movie. But I was like, it really did send me down like a rabbit hole of like, what happened? And it seems like, yes, it sounds like it's a very emotional, like 6-minute documentary. I'd be curious to watch it. I don't have it available to me, but it sounds intriguing because the fact was, every review I found for this home video release acknowledged that special feature.
I want the documentary of Cam going deep on the making of the package and what he finds down that dark path.
Well, so we've got a bit of time before this episode comes out, so let's see if we can do some spy work and see if we can track it down.
Yeah.
If we can, we will put it in the show notes, a link, and you can get it. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel or something like that. But if not, sorry, folks. Well, it's beginning to look a lot like the review section of the podcast. So what we'll do, gents, guests always go first. Let's go with Liam. You're up. What did you think of the package?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, and I won't reveal my star rating now or anything like that, but I did like the film. It's certainly a lot better than Men in Black International, which we came on to speak about before. That, I mean, that is not an accolade, but yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, yeah, fuck it. I will reveal my star rating now because it is the definition of a 3-star movie. Like, in terms of this, a bit like Matt says, this 1989, Andrew Davis. Now, Andrew Davis is someone who I kind of describe as a bit of a journeyman filmmaker. But I don't mean that as an insult or anything like that, because being a journeyman filmmaker in 1989 was a very, very different proposition to what it is now. Like, back then, like, you would just get these guys who just knew how to put a picture together. And, like you say, you watch this film, it's a fucking film. Like, you watch it, it feels cinematic, it feels it feels big budget, like, for, what it is and everything like that. It feels like a big movie. And it's just, it's well put together, it's well shot, well made, and it just feels like a very, very professional production. I kind of think that carries on later on in his career. Certainly The Fugitive is like an absolutely efficient machine of a movie. That is so well put together, but it's not flashy. It's just incredibly efficient filmmaking. That's just great. It's a great package, as it were. I mean, like you say, I think the building blocks to that kind of start here, and he continues to build on it with Under Siege, and then go into kind of The Fugitive and such like that. And you got Gene Hackman, Tommy Lee Jones, two great actors, basically in the kind of co-leads of the good guy and spoiler bad guy. When I first looked at the plot on my Cinema Paradiso kind of rental packet, which is always a case of they always have whatever is obviously on the Blu-ray, just stamped on the front of the kind of the rental kind of postlet, and it always cuts off halfway through. So you only ever get a little tease of what the main plot is. I was looking at it, and the bit that I was reading just described the thing of Gene Hackman's character having to escort Tommy Lee Jones's character cross country. And so it didn't get to the other stuff. It made it sound like an espionage thriller reworking of The Last Detail with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, that'd be interesting. This is going to be a road trip between Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones. At some point, someone's going to go after them. They're going to have to work together.
Bit of a Midnight
Run
vibe.
So I was really surprised when literally that he gets ambushed and Tommy Lee Jones goes, and then he is very much the bad guy of the piece. I genuinely wasn't expecting that, so that was a shock for me. But yeah, this is just a really good tab A into slot B, efficient kind of thriller of the time, really, and it's got some nice action flourishes in it, and Gene Hackman kind of powerhouse performance in the middle. He's doing his job there. But yeah, like I say, very much a 3-star picture. If you caught this on a Wednesday night on ITV back in the day with the news in between, you've been loving it.
Well, you had Men in Black International, and you're saying the package is better.
Yes.
So I can only say, as Yaz once said, the only way is up. And I'm glad I'm glad we've improved on our last film. But Matt, what about you? What did you think?
Yeah, no, this is a perfectly fine picture, as it were, and it's these kind of films from this era, these sort of heavily political conspiracy thrillers can be a bit dry to me. I think it's an era of time where there's a lot of these being made, and I think they do vary in quality, and this one has all the ingredients to be solid, and it is solid. I don't think it's outwardly exceptional, but it has a lot of twists and turns as it goes. The sort of opening, assassination attempt, is really thrilling. I think the middle kind of section gets a bit bogged down in a bit of, it's a series of investigating and a quick attack here and an escape and a regroup and so on and so on. But then, I genuinely thought the final 20 minutes, for example, were really, really tense, and it really kind of stuck the landing of the finale. But, this is something that's a bit of a dad movie, I think. It's definitely one where the action is in fits and starts. It's not built around that, but that kind of suits the tone. And these kind of post-Cold War thrillers as well are really interesting. All this sort of Red Scare stuff. Did Rocky IV teach no one anything? And yeah, I think this whole idea, when you kind of get down to the motivations of the villains, as it were, this idea of being against nuclear disarmament because they're acknowledging that it's only the threat of nuclear war that stops sort of ground level war from happening is kind of really interesting in a sense of, I'm sure there's a lot of truth in that, and it's blurring this line of who's really up to no good and out for the greater cause. But yeah, all the sort of ancillary characters here are a lot of interesting people as well. You've got the dad from Home Alone. You have the wonderful Sherry Ross as General Hopkins, who I always know as the military guy from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. He must have made a career of playing army types, I think. And yeah, all these little sort of components within this piece. Dennis Franz as well, of course, and Pam Grier. So a really great supporting cast as well, where it feels like everybody gets a little something to do.
I was just going to say Pam Grier, practically a cameo in this, really. Just a few scenes. I
Yeah.
was really disappointed by that. When I saw her in the cast, I was like, oh, Pam fucking Grier. Amazing. Like, I wasn't, because I've seen a bunch of her 70s movies and obviously seen Jackie Brown. But 80s, I was like, oh, I don't know what she was doing in the 80s, really. Like, so I was just like, that's really cool that she's going to be in it. And then, yeah, she's kind of like just in a few scenes and she's kind of barely recognizable because she's all kind of very much prim and proper, like as a kind of army person. And she's killed off way too fast.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because it could have been an interesting, really different role for her from the kind of blaxploitation kind of women she was playing in the 70s and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got really excited because I've got two notes back to back where one says, "Oh, Zora from Blade Runner and Foxy Brown are teaming up. I love this." And then the next one is just, "And she's dead."
Yeah, I made a note. I never trust a McAllister. And so when the dad turns up, I'm like, these guys, they're up to no good. Catherine O'Hara, up to no good in most films she's into. And so as soon as I knew he was on the screen, I was like, this guy's going to be a villain. And he was.
Oh, John Hurd. Yeah.
He was very oily.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Pam Grier thing bummed me out because, like, she's one of the most dynamic movie stars of the 70s, and it just felt like when she hit the 80s, they just had no idea what to do with her. And Andrew Davis, to his credit, like, she had a pretty prominent role in Above the Law, so he obviously liked working with her and brought her back for this movie, but, like, this is a very forgettable turn for Miss Pam Grier, who obviously...
But she will also be back in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
That's right, yeah. It really wasn't until that, like, Jackie Brown resurgence where they were suddenly like, oh, right, she's, like, incredible. Because even, like, I remember she popped up as, like, a mom in Mars Attacks in, like, kind of a thankless role, one where you don't get to have a lot of fun. So, yeah, kind of a bummer for her. But my overall thoughts was, like, this was... I found as of late, I think I brought this up on the show, or maybe it was on the Patreon, I can't remember, found a lot of enjoyment in going back and watching some of these older Clint Eastwood kind of thrillers, the ones that at the time I could not be bothered watching. I picked up a Clint Eastwood career box set for very cheap at a thrift store, and so I was watching stuff like Blood Work, Absolute Power. Actually, Absolute Power co-stars Gene Hackman, but movies of that era that at the time were not particularly well reviewed, but you watch them now, and they don't make movies like this anymore, so they're kind of fun to sit and watch. And that's kind of how I felt about The Package, where if I were to watch this in 1989 in comparison to a lot of the stuff coming out, I wonder if I would have been very dismissive of it, as, some critics were. I think it's actually decently reviewed, but not strongly reviewed. It has elements that genuinely work. I thought, like, there was some genuine tension going on here. I like how the action can be really messy, and that's something Andrew Davis does very well, where I don't mean messy technically. I mean in terms of like there's a hit early in this movie where two, hikers shoot down basically a car. And it is like this bombing of a car that's so messy. It doesn't kill anyone on board. The car's on fire, crashing out of control. And they make it look like really chaotic and violent in a way that I think is very effective. I think he's an incredibly skilled action filmmaker. And I think for me, what maybe holds this one back a little bit is that I can see all the DNA of him perfecting his skills that are going to pay off with his next two big movies, Under Siege and The Fugitive. It's like you've got the guys all around the tables talking about, exposition basically, which would become a huge part of Under Siege. You have the Chicago locations, and Andrew Davis was, Chicago born and used Chicago in many of his movies. But you compare like the Chicago stuff in this movie to like what he does in The Fugitive. It feels like he's basically building the building blocks that are going to take him to the next plateau. And so it's fun to go back and watch this one. But if I'm like to start putting together the great action films of kind of this rough era, this one's not going to rank particularly highly, even though I did enjoy the performances and just the overall vibe, because this is not a vibe we have anymore.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that there's a lot of that now, where loads and loads of movies this kind of era that were the kind of, big release, but reasonably maybe kind of like slightly B-level, but like mid-level films that at the time got kind of just dismissed or lost in the shuffle, which now people go back to and are like, oh, this is fucking great. And it literally is, just because there is a certain level of filmmaking craft present in this era. A lot of that, of course, has to do with things being shot on film at the end of the day, that just isn't as present anymore in kind of mainstream movie making. I don't mean that in a way of, oh, they don't make good films anymore, like, because obviously they do. There's loads of great films coming out, but obviously we live in a very digital age. There aren't many people making shooting films on actual film stock anymore, and there just is a certain level of precision that comes with shooting on film, because it ain't cheap shooting on film, lads. Like, I tell you that, like, and whereas digital, you can run and run, and unless you're a very, very skilled director of photography, um, shooting on digital at the end of the day, it can look very flat and stuff. Don't get me wrong, obviously that there are, like I say, there are amazing cinematographers working now who can make digital look fantastic. But I think if you're, not such a skilled cinematographer, it can look really kind of televisual, as it were, a word that doesn't really work anymore because now TV is so big budget, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like when you go back to this kind of era and watch like a lesser movie from Andrew Davis or John McTiernan or something, it's like they just really pop in a way that if you were to watch more of a action programmer nowadays, they just don't even look like they belong from like the similar kind of release.
I think from my point of view, when Cammy Baby slipped a spy film under the tree for me this year, I was very excited. I was hoping to have a wonderful Christmas time. This Christmas became more of a Festivus. Which is a bit of a Seinfeld reference. But I not that I didn't enjoy this film. There's stuff to enjoy, but Cam's talking about like how he can see Andrew Davis sort of perfecting his craft and has better films coming up. For me, I couldn't help but think of the films that this film is drawing from and not improving on. There's DNA of things like The Day of the Jackal all throughout this film. It's a lot of the same story, but it actually like diminishes what that film does, Day of the Jackal, and so you get this kind of actiony version of that film, but it doesn't raise the game of the story or anything like that. It doesn't do anything to add to this particular story or plot. So I enjoyed the performances. I enjoyed lots of these sequences, but when it all came together, I just was left a little bit underwhelmed, I have to say.
Well, when you look at the Jackal, the original Day of the Jackal, like that is a masterpiece. I guess we can say at the very least, this movie, if it is kind of a loose retelling of that sort of story, it's at least better than the Bruce Willis Jackal. It does it better than that.
I'll give you that. Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I bet if you watched the Bruce Willis Jackal now, you'd probably go, oh, but it's so much better than if they made the Jackal today. On Netflix or something.
I don't know.
We did it quite recently. I can confirm it's not.
Oh, okay. I mean, I haven't seen it, and this Day of the Jackal I haven't seen, which is a big blind spot for me. I haven't seen Day of the Jackal. There's loads of times where I've almost watched it, I just haven't got around to it. I do want to see it. It's definite blind spot.
No, it's definitely a film to check out. I mean, for me, it was. I knew what the film was riffing off of, and I was hoping I would get more than what I was given. Not that I didn't like what I was given, but if you're going to retell this story with like an 80s action edge to it, make it good. And just something was missing for me.
Yeah. There's a podcast I listened to, Big Picture Show, that introduced the term, like, say, the garbage crime movie. And what they're saying is, it doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but they're kind of those, like, pulpy crime movies that you would really enjoy. They're the ones that people genuinely like watching on TV and, rewatching on home video or whatever. This is kind of like the garbage conspiracy movie, where it's not really aspiring to be kind of a 3 Days of the Condor level thriller, but in terms of being a like programmer that you would just watch a kind of fun conspiracy story with like action set pieces, recognizable characters, and kind of a plot that you can just kind of follow with your eyes closed because you've seen similar things. I think this one works that way. Like, it's kind of comfort food conspiracy thriller stuff, but it's definitely, I agree, Scott, like not raising the bar at all.
Well, it's either like an extended episode of like a prestige TV political thriller type thing, or a very condensed season. Like, it has feels quite 24 like. You can imagine a 24 season doing this, and they do in many ways.
Yeah, I literally have written a note, very 24, with enemies inside the American government, like it doing that kind of fake out of, oh, it's kind of, this other country, the bad guy. Oh no, it's people within our own government who are the bad guys, kind of thing. Like, it feels very 24.
Like, if they made it again now, it would come out as a 6-part limited series on Paramount Plus or something.
I mean, it probably is going to happen at some point. I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day with literally every single random kind of film gets remade as a 10-part Netflix series now. So, I'm sure it'll be happening.
Well, Christmas surprise, Scott and I are actually exec producing a 6-part package miniseries for Apple TV coming to you in 2023.
You're getting Hackman out of retirement.
I actually like a larger package. Can we get 10 episodes?
The biggest package you could ever dream of. Well, let's keep up the festive cheer and talk about things that we liked before we sort of go in for the dislikes. So let's go for Liam first on this one. Something you liked that you want to focus on.
I really, really liked just the message of the film, to be honest, because Matt, you talked about the whole nuclear disarmament thing, because this is set around this nuclear disarmament treaty. This seems, again, like you say, derivative. I think there's been about 30 films like set around a nuclear disarmament treaty or something like that, and then there's someone within the government trying to stop it. And at the end, what I like, it ends with this big argument between Hackman and Hurd's characters, where they're kind of, having this ideological kind of debate, essentially, like about the nuclear weapons, and because Hackman is very much like, nuclear disarmament is a good thing. I mean, just feels amazing to have a hero at the center of a major Hollywood film like being pro-nuclear disarmament, to be completely honest. It's like, feels like it'd be less likely to happen now. And literally, like, Hurd is screaming at him like, well, we want him, and Hackman goes, who? A bunch of nutcases. And like, it's this thing of like, they're going back and forth and like biting chunks at each other about this kind of like debate, and it's really, really electric stuff, and Hackman's fantastic, and you can really kind of punch the air and root for him, like in this sequence. And I just loved that message of just like, essentially, our hero is pro this and it's a good thing, and the message of the film is very much like, we it's a kind of positive, hopeful look at the future that unfortunately we still have not reached. So I really liked the message and like of the film and kind of the hopefulness of it.
Well, it's interesting because I think I was reading this earlier. The film was shot before the fall of the Berlin Wall, so it was all about sort of the hopefulness of the end of the Cold War and bringing down the Iron Curtain. But by the time the film's out, the Berlin Wall's down, and so it's kind of like it loses an edge a little bit, and that's one of the reasons people think it may not have been as popular looking back, because we've had this sort of nuclear stabilization around the world, and everyone shook hands, which I find interesting. And I want to point out, you said you liked the sort of the main crux of this film. There's actually a film that's very near and dear to both of your hearts. It's very similar to this when it comes to things like disarmament that jumped out to me. I think you've probably spoken about it on your podcast.
Oh,
I'm seeing blank stares.
I mean, you're talking about a Star Trek film, like I would imagine, but in my head, my head is gone. But there definitely is a Star Trek film about these things. See, this is now. See, listeners, Star Trek podcast from a non-Trekkie perspective. It might have taken me longer to get there, but here we are.
But it struck me quite early on in the film. But Star Trek 6 has a lot of the same things going on. It's like the Federation and the Klingons are sort of coming together, but you've got like the bad guys on both sides, even in the Federation, working together to bring the whole alliance down. And that's the same story that's running through this film.
That's very true. Came out 2 years after this as well. So what we're saying is Undiscovered Country nicked everything from the package. However, they made the superior film, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, I guess they would have had a little bit more perspective, which would help on where things were going. What I liked about this movie, I mean, I'll have other things, but like in regards to what you were saying, Liam, this movie doesn't talk down to the audience. And a lot of action movies nowadays are like, keep it simple, keep it simple. We've talked about like the Taken movies, for example, on the show. And it's like those were very popular mainstream action releases. Kind of that, you could call them garbage action movies or whatever you want to, refer to them as, B-movie action. And like they are like as stripped down as possible so as to allow every possible audience member to watch them. And what I liked about this movie, and maybe it didn't fare well for the movie's box office, but you kind of have to pay attention to what's going on. They are talking about the political situation at the time, and they're not dumbing it down hugely. They're expecting you to, follow along with them. So I give them points for that. It's not necessarily trying to break the mold and become the most brilliant of all conspiracy thrillers, but it's at least not dumbing it down and making it insulting.
I mean, it feels grown up, doesn't it? That's the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a way that films seldom do now. You get a lot of films intended for adults or older audiences that don't even feel this kind of ground level grown up, I guess. And it's a weird kind of way where back then you could have movies like this that did hit big, and this one didn't particularly do so. But the ones that did were often ones, you compare the sort of top 10 grossing films of the year from the 70s and 80s compared to now, obviously a completely different landscape. But you would see films of this stature like hitting well with critics and with moviegoers.
Well, I was just saying, Matt, that you use the term dad movie, which I think you've picked up off your Sundol Deep co-host Daryl.
It's all the submarine films we cover.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I knew you were going to say it, and I find it very interesting what you're saying in terms of now we don't really have films like this. In fact, the films we have like this. So I suppose now if we look at a recent kind of spy thriller, The Grey Man. I enjoyed The Grey Man, but I think compared to this, you'd say that it's a lot more juvenile than this film. I think this film feels a lot more adult, and literally we refer to these kind of films in this era as dad movies, but actually back in those days, I mean, I'm 37. Like back in those days, that would have been like our dads would have been that age watching these kind of like films and everything like that. And it's weird that we go now, we kind of in this state of Arrested Development, so we go, oh damn it, yeah, that's for like older, kind of boring, kind of like grayer kind of people, because we're still young and youthful and watching kind of more kind of fun poppy kind of films. Like, and actually it's like, no, these were designed for our kind of age, our audience, mature audiences. And although this film didn't hit the box office, lots and lots of movies of its ilk and type did and were very successful. Like you say, if you go back and look at the top 10s for 70s, 80s, you see tons of originals, loads of kind of mid-budget, intelligent adult thrillers and stuff like that. Like, it's a very different era.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head then. I think what the main difference is, you could argue, is the casting. Like, you could have this sort of film now, and the ones that happen now, you have your Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans leading it. Back then, you can lead it with your Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones. They're not heartthrobs. They're real characters. They're real guys, And I think that's what's lacking in sort of modern cinema, if you like. These kind of movie star everymans that would fill it, and you see it through to stuff like, I remember this argument being made for Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, where Jurassic Park is a film led by Sam Neill, who's just a normal guy. Like, he seems like a normal dinosaur science man. What was it? Paleontologist, whatever it is.
Dinosaur science man.
Whereas
that's
dinosaur science man. And then you get to World, and it's like, well, throw Chris Pratt in there, and it's like there's a definite step away from casting real middle-aged men in leading roles where they do also have romantic subplots as well.
If this was made now, Johnny Gallagher would have 8-pack abs, 100%. And we would get to see them at some point.
I think just to speak to that point, what I always identify with sort of dad films is you tend to find there's a lot of, they're always right, and there's no chinks in their armor. These sort of Gene Hackman characters of this era, and that's why I always think of like in dad films, it's like Taken as well. It's the same sort of thing. Liam Neeson does no wrong according to the film, despite the fact that in the third one he drugs his own daughter who's pregnant. But we won't dig into that because he's Liam Neeson. But now, like, you look at The Grey Man, Ryan Gosling is a flawed character. He's got these quirks to him, and he's a bit weird, which is, maybe that's an evolution of storytelling, maybe that's a de-evolution of storytelling. I'm not one to sort of say, but that's how I identify dad films. But Matt, something you liked about The Package?
Well, Liam kind of hit a great point with all the more critical intellectual ideas around the messaging in this film. So I'm going to pick out a few, just a quick handful of smaller things. So I guess number one, I like how this film uses the Christmas setting. I'm sure we'll get onto it as well, but it's kind of very background. It's very ancillary. It doesn't override everything, but it's very much there, and you can just about get away with watching it as a Christmas watch and feeling a bit of Christmas cheer, I think. But it's a nice little just flavor to the story to help it stand apart. I really like that diner shootout that you get about 2/3 through. I think that's really just sort of tense and like you guys said, very messy as well in the way that's executed in a good way. And of course, you get a great old Chicago car chase with Hackman behind the wheel, much as he was in French Connection. So it's great to see a kind of very, obviously very practical, location-based car chase with, Hackman driving.
Even the part where there's like the neo-Nazi rally in the streets, and they're just trying to like get through that group to get to the operative.
Yeah.
That scene is like really well shot too. Like there's genuine tension to the action filmmaking throughout this movie, and I was so refreshed to see that, because it's not commonplace now to just kind of throw on an action B movie and see legitimately well shot action.
Yeah, and that car chase is well done and well shot and well staged. But I will say they are 100% trying to recreate the French Connection car chase. Because, I mean, literally, not only is it Hackman at the wheel, obviously, but there's really similar shots like in it to the French Connection car chase. There's like the performance from Hackman is similar. So like it seems like he's been told to kind of ape his performance in French Connection, the way he's at the wheel and stuff like that, and kind of like banging the wheel and things like that, like, getting really, really angry. And there's some really decent stunts in there, but it can't. It is almost foolhardy to try and recreate. Like, I mean, literally, the French Connection car chase is like, one of the most iconic action sequences in all cinema. Like, you're gonna be tough, to kind of compete with it. But it's still fun.
Well, like, I think this just dovetails into my other my major which is Gene Hackman. And the movie has a real understanding of the iconography of Gene Hackman, which ties right into that French, Connection car chase there, where they know how to use him as a movie star. And it almost feels in some ways like it's almost evoking the past eras where you'd have like John Wayne as an aging man playing roles that he was just a little too old to be playing. Gene Hackman was like getting towards 60 when he shot this movie, and he's like leading a team of like 20-something-year-old soldiers, and he's the guy who's like the ultimate badass of the group. And I'm like, would this be the case? Would we send out like something like 60-year-old soldier? I don't know about this, but the authority of the actor and the gravitas he carries and what we bring to the movie through our relationship with all of his work really works very well in the movie's favor.
Well, you totally buy that he is that guy. I mean, they even point out in the film, hey, you shouldn't be a sergeant by now. You should be like something or other. Like, that's a very low rank as far as rank goes. If he's been a lifelong military man and he's in his mid-50s, not only should he be retired by now, but he wouldn't be leading a team of, I guess, people on guard duty. That just wouldn't be happening. He'd be pushing pencils somewhere.
He's just pulling a Maverick. He's that's where he wants to be.
I was literally just thinking that. I was about to say, are you saying we bring Hackman out of retirement for the package Gallagher?
Oh. I'd be all for it. I mean, you guys have sort of taken all of my main likes. Hackman was going to be the one I was going to mention, if not. But I will just point out, I really like some of the sort of action sequences. I think the car park shootout is actually quite fun. And seeing everyone and Joanna Cassidy being chased around. So Joanna Cassidy, we haven't spoken about her too much. I think she's fantastic. Dennis Franz is great in what he's given. I would like to have seen more Pam Grier, but yeah, I think there's a couple of performances I want to talk about maybe in my dislike section. But for Hackman, John Hurd, and Dennis Franz, I think do a lot with a little.
Franz is so cast to type because, the next year he's in Die Hard 2, NYPD Blues a few years later. But, this is the type of role he's so good at. And there's not a lot on the page for him, but the whole, family man stuff really worked for me. And I was legit worried that he would die.
Yeah.
Yeah, mate, I totally 100% thought he was. I literally have written here, thought Franz was dead meat for sure after the shootout at the diner. I was like, and he gets shot. I was like, well, obviously he's dead. And when he survived, I was like, what? It was really, really smart. But I fucking love a bit of Franz. I mean, because Franz basically just plays Sipowicz, doesn't he? Whatever he's doing, he basically plays Sipowicz from NYPD Blue. And that's fine, because he's fucking great at it. And whenever he turns up, I'm like, oh, bit of Franz. Amazing. And of course, he provides one of the big Christmas moments, because we get Christmas at Sipowicz's, where they go round his place, and there's a big Christmas tree there, and everything like that, and his kids are running around. I actually wrote down all the different kind of Christmas moments we get in this film, because early on, very, very early on, when they're having the big kind of meeting about the treaty, someone announces it's the holiday season, because he says in the spirit of the festive season or something like that. I was like, oh, okay, cool, they've got it in early, plus there's snow, so literally we're feeling festive already. There's a festive grotting at one point, where there's Christmas decorations in one of the a woman's home, Walter's wife, who gets killed, and I swear she got garroted with Christmas lights. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But yeah, there's little Christmas touches all the way through. There's carol singers in the city. I'm pretty sure the ending bit is actually set on Christmas Eve.
I think so.
But yeah, there's not huge amount, but there's it's that kind of enemy of the state. There's Christmas trees in the background, but a little bit more, because at least they mention it's Christmas, kind of within this.
It feels a little more Christmassy than, say, 3 Days of the Condor, which is also a Christmas spy movie, but this one really works it in a lot throughout.
Yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources, whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a top secret volcano lair. We're putting out the call for your support.
That's right. As you may know, we've activated the Spy Hearts Patreon, home of our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors, and full film commentaries with more intel than a Basil exposition briefing.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
The Long Kiss Goodnight commentary is live, and there's more holiday fun. We're getting a little romantic this season because we're looking at the 2003 romantic comedy, Love Actually.
And if that sounds delicious, then become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy jinx. Well, speaking of Christmas, it's getting cold outside. So let's talk about things that we didn't quite like. Let's go to Matt first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I like about it is the sum of its parts. So I think as a whole, it doesn't quite reach the heights it could, and I think this is exemplified. I think that middle section where it gets a little sloppy, where we lose Pam Grier, and then it kind of plods along a bit as it realizes maybe that the plot here is kind of all about the setup and what kicks things off, and then having the reveal of Tommy Lee Jones's character and what he's up to, and then ultimately the kind of very tense, almost real-time element of the way the finale plays out. So I think there's a bit in the middle where there's a bit of flab, and that's where it feels maybe the most kind of TV movie, as well as it kind of saves its money for the end half hour. And I think ultimately it's just not all that memorable either. There's the actors are all pretty great, but character-wise, there's no one really iconic. Like Gallagher's not in the pantheon of great protagonists. Really, it is.
You take that
Hackman,
back.
we kind of no. Look, well, with this legacy call, will prove me wrong, I'm sure. But yeah, I think it's one that it's fairly enjoyable in the moment, but it's it's nobody's favorite film, should we say?
Oh, whoa! Don't spoil the
Quite
not Chris vote yet. Hang on. Liam, what about you? Something you didn't like?
I think Tommy Lee Jones is slightly oddly used in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's before he becomes a kind of big star, and it kind of feels like it. Like when he's introduced, he kind of like comes across like he's meant to be playing like a younger, cheeky, chappy character. I know that Tommy Lee Jones looks old, like whatever he's doing, but he isn't young. He isn't.
Can he
young
play young?
at the end of the day? Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't imagine Tommy Lee Jones playing a child, can you?
Steve Buscemi was more impressive as a young man with a skateboard in that scene from whatever that show was.
30 Rock.
He looked younger from 30 Rock. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. But I kind of felt like that was almost deliberate because he's actually pretending to be someone younger in those opening scenes. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe that's actually quite like clever kind of acting. But then he never really gets developed too much because when I look at the poster and it's got Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones on the poster, which is a classic case of a poster being kind of developed later, I think, because Tommy Lee Jones has become a bigger star later. So on the Blu-ray case and stuff like that, they've got to get both of them on the poster. But if you actually look at the original poster that was released for it, which I'm looking at now, Hackman is completely front and center. Actually says Hackman, like second name, like cruise style. And Tommy Lee Jones is relegated to a tiny little kind of like picture postcard kind of like passport photo in the bottom right hand corner alongside Joanna Cassidy. So this is very much Hackman's kind of film at the time. So he is the lesser role, but it feels like you've got Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones in a film. It should be Hackman versus Lee Jones, but that just wouldn't have been the meeting of two powerhouses at the time. And that in retrospect, I can only feel disappointing. My assumption was, like as I said, is literally that he was going to play this guy who's this disgraced soldier, and then they were going to go on the road trip together. Someone's going to try and kill him. He was going to discover that actually, he's a great hero, and the reason he's being fucked over is because he knows the truth. And then they were going to team up and go against it. And I totally thought it was going to be like a sort of buddy cop spy movie with them two. And of course, it isn't. And I kind of think that's almost like at this point a lost opportunity. I don't really feel like we can blame the film for that because they wouldn't have known what they had at the time. But it just feels like there's kind of like a more interesting or at least more entertaining film within there. It's almost 2 hours. It's like 1 hour 48. Think could probably be slightly shorter, tighten it up a little bit, not too much, because there's a lot of kind of plot and stuff to put in there. There are some good action beats throughout, but occasionally it veers into being a bit workmanlike. There's definitely nothing I hated in this, but like Matt says, Gallagher is not one of the great protagonists. It very much is massively elevated by it just being Hackman. Basically, if an also ran kind of Hollywood star of the time is playing this role, it's dead in the water. I feel like Hackman elevates the film massively.
Well, it's interesting to note, looking at that poster you mentioned, the billing is different to how it is on IMDb. It's Gene Hackman, then Joanna Cassidy, then Tommy Lee Jones. So,
which is in the movie too.
Yeah, and to be fair, it is a buddy cop drama, but with Gene Hackman and Joanna Cassidy. That's really what it is. And I suppose like I'll pivot onto one of my dislikes really quickly, is how they really underserved Joanna Cassidy towards the end of the film. She has a great setup. You know, she reminds me weirdly reminds me of Kate Mulgrew's character in Remo Williams, of all people. Like, she's a military woman on a mission. She is out for the truth. But then, much like Kate Mulgrew in Remo Williams, in the third act, she's just sort of doting around. And Joanna Cassidy in this film is basically at home looking after the kids.
Yeah.
Whereas she's like a lieutenant in the military. She should be having a more active role, and she is at the start, but then just sort of disappears. And I think that's a real detriment to the film.
It's not a shock in this type of movie from 1989 to have her kind of lose agency towards the end of the movie. That's so common, but that doesn't mean that makes it enjoyable to watch now. Like, you want to see more, because Joanna Cassidy, like, this was, I think, a year after Roger Rabbit, so this was like a real career bump for her. And yeah, like, she's more than capable in the first half of the movie, and I like her sparring sessions with Gene Hackman, like more of it, but yeah, towards the back half. But also, to be fair, this kind of falls into the Pam Grier problem too. This movie doesn't have a lot of time for its female characters. It's ultimately going to come down to Gene Hackman kicking in a door and shooting down Tommy Lee Jones. Like, that's what's driving the movie. And just to what Liam's saying, I think I'm just going to make this my dislike, which is the Tommy Lee Jones character is like, they don't really develop him, and it's for a specific reason, is because they don't want you to know what he's up to, which then results in the movie playing fast and loose. Oh, there he is. Look at him just walk around the street. At one point, he's dressed like Luigi from For Your Eyes Only. And I'm like, okay. Now he's dressed like a priest. Okay. And it's really...
He's a master of disguise, isn't he?
He's the next Dana Carvey. And it's like, it's all for this reveal that he is there to, assassinate this Soviet ruler. And it's like, okay... Like, they've actually hidden the motivation throughout the movie, which is fine if you want to pull the rug out from the audience, but it makes it tough to get particularly invested in what that character is doing through the entire course of the movie, because you have no idea. No idea.
And also, it gives you this sort of really interesting setup with him at the start when they're on the plane ride, Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones. There's like a really good sort of chemistry between the two of them. You want to see that explored more, but they're separated almost instantaneously after that. And Tommy Lee Jones is basically left to his own devices. And I think he has more costume changes than the villain in The Jackal. I don't know who played that now.
I think he's just called The Jackal.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, Scott, you sent me just before this recording we were going to do it. You sent me just like some interviews, because I was having trouble, as I mentioned up front, digging up information on this movie. And there was an interview with Tommy Lee Jones from the press tour, and I really felt bad for the reporter, because she's interviewing Tommy Lee Jones, who's not known to be the friendliest of interviews. And this is a younger Tommy Lee Jones. I don't know. Maybe he was more of a bundle of joy back then. But there's a point where she says to him, like, I really loved the gestures you made with your face in this movie. And he's just like, yeah, thanks. And it's like, you could see that she was searching for things to really talk to him about with the performance, because most of it is him silent on screen throughout.
Yeah, 100%.
I think for my dislike, just to sort of wrap us up, is I think I find the plot to be somewhat indecipherable at times.
Yeah.
I like a challenging spy film with the best of them. It's kind of what we talk about here from time to time. And you talk about Tommy Lee Jones's motivations being obscured. There's this whole other like patsy assassin built into this story that I watched these films twice to really get my head around a lot of them. And it took 2 watches to figure out what the patsy was there for. And there's this whole like neo-Nazi subplot that actually doesn't mean anything to the overall story, because Tommy Lee Jones's character is going to assassinate the chap either way. It's just a cover. But once you start to like pick at those seams, the tapestry starts to fall apart, because you think like, why did the sort of general send Sergeant Gallagher on the mission with Tommy Lee Jones after knowing that the colonel, played by John Hurd, and he would be able to connect the dots. He's actually like making his own mission fail by doing that. And so I found it a very strange choice. And throughout, like, it's more about hanging out with the characters and really telling you what the plot is, but like it's trying to tell you to like be wary of what's going to happen. You've got shots of Tommy Lee Jones using his rifle and doing like target practice and things like that. Like, oh, he's out to get them, and all this sort of disguise work, and he's doing some spy stuff. But it it's not like it's leaving breadcrumbs for you to follow. It just has like one little exposition dump at the end to explain the patsy, which you have to really listen for, like Cam mentioned at the top. And if you don't hear that, none of it makes sense.
Yeah, it's the type of movie that is quite convoluted and labyrinthine when you watch it, but I don't know that when you go back and connect the dots, it rewards that attention. It's like, it's mostly there as just sort of this canvas to have action sequences, some great star turns from like Gene Hackman and Dennis Franz, but you're not going to sit there and connect all the dots on a rewatch and be like, oh, this just raised this movie up to a whole other level.
The ones that really work are the ones where once you do rewatch and connect the dots and know where it's going, it elevates it, like exactly that. As opposed to makes you from the very start maybe be like, oh, I can see all the things that don't matter or just detract in other ways. And that must be a really hard thing to do, but it's because I think getting through by the skin of your teeth to the end in some sort of sense of being a satisfying journey, but not wanting anyone to think twice about it is like one thing. But then it's like, yeah, repeat watchability can go right down the toilet if it just makes you go, wait a minute.
It's you think about The Day of the Jackal, a film we've referenced several times in this review. Throughout, you're looking at both the inspector and the jackal on a mission to catch each other in a way, and also for the jackal to take out Charles de Gaulle. So there's the whole assassination angle built into it. But you see the jackal going through the machinations of training, getting his target, picking his spot. You don't see Tommy Lee Jones really doing any of this.
Yeah.
So you don't know why he's doing it or what he's doing. There's no tension built there. You've just got Sergeant Gallagher in this case, or the sort of inspector in The Day of the Jackal, chasing something he doesn't really understand until right at the end when he understands what's going on. And so I think the viewer is just not brought along with it. And I don't think it's sort of doing that storytelling thing of holding the people at bay and giving you snippets, which that works. It's just holding you at bay, and as Cam said, just giving you some action sequences instead.
But you do get to see Tommy Lee Jones smoking a pipe at one point, and you also get to see him in a very nice red shirt priest disguise at one point, which I was like, oof, that's a stylish priest going down there. Tommy Lee Jones. I loved how he was just kind of like, look, if I've got to disguise myself as a priest, I'm doing it with style. Like, yeah, he was thinking it. He was thinking ahead to Will Smith and Men in Black, because like, I make this look good. Like,
If you like spies and silly disguises, you may just actually enjoy The Jackal.
okay, well, I do very much want to see Day of the Jackal. Like, the film's very much on the watch list. Not too sure about the Bruce Willis one.
Oh no, I mean the Bruce Willis one.
You
that
mean the Bruce Willis
loaded.
one? Okay.
Bruce Willis changed his costume like 10 times in the film. It's ridiculous. We tracked it on our review back in the day. Well, I suppose before we get to the ultimate question of this podcast, I'm just going to throw it out for any final notes. Liam, Matt, do you have anything for us?
I mean, literally, at one point, just another note about Christmas. At one point, a character says to a woman, "So, you sit on Santa's lap? Did you tell him I was a good boy?" So there you go. Very more festive fun from the package.
Nothing else from me. I think if anything, though, it does make me want to see more of these films as opposed to less, which is good. And a lot of the 70s classics I need to check out, and Parallax View being number one, of course.
You've not seen Parallax View?
No, but I've noticed it is on Paramount Plus, which I do now have because of Spocklight.
Oh,
so
mate, Parallax View
Great
is
film.
incredible.
But even these ones from like the early 90s, I want to check out some more. So
me and David Trumbull did a presentation on Parallax View together in back at uni in our film production degree. Full presentation, got a first for it, mate. Boom.
The true power couple, the true buddy couple.
Yeah, exactly. We were the real Tommy Lee Jones and Hackman in this film. Well, they should have been.
Trumbull and Dempsey. That is the name of a cop show, anyway.
Yeah,
right?
he's a great flick. But also, have you seen the Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan movies like Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger?
Yeah. But yeah, could do with a rewatch.
Clear and Present Danger,
sure.
which Link, John Bishop did rewrites on. I actually think is the like before I saw them, I was pretty sure Patriot Games has the better reputation, but I think Clear and Present Danger is the better of those two movies, definitely. So you know, if he did rewrites on that,
I think I just remember our Spocklight co-host Paul showing me those in that time period when he would show me everything, where my film education came from in like college, and just being like, Christ, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger. Like, I know you like Harrison Ford, Paul, but these are bore snore, and it took a while to like warm up to those, I swear.
I reckon if you watch Clear and Present Danger again now, if you're wanting to see
Yeah.
more of these kind of movies, really well made, just efficient kind of thrillers like Clear and Present Danger, mate, you're in for a treat.
We haven't tackled them yet, but you may have just booked your next appearance whenever we get round to one of those Jack Ryan films. Cam, do you have anything for us?
I just had a couple small little things. There's a lot of Uzis in this movie. That is so of that 80s, early 90s action period. I was down for it.
Yeah.
And just lastly, Joanna Cassidy, let's give her all a trophy, people. She did a whole running scene in high heels.
The Jurassic World.
The Bryce Dallas Howard of her day.
Yeah. She did it first.
That's right.
I had one note left, and I actually mentioned this off air, and I annoyed a lot of people with it, so I'm going to do it on air. I think The Package is more of a Christmas film than Die Hard.
Yeah, what the fuck are you chatting about, mate? Like, literally, like, where are you pulling this from?
How is it
Like, yeah,
more
I don't know
Christmassy
how-
than a Christmas party movie?
Well, the Christmas party's in the background, and you hear a couple of songs, but that's about it. Like, every scene
whole
is
thing's on
littered
Christmas
with
Eve, isn't
Christmas stuff. I know it's at Christmas Eve, but like the plot doesn't even. The plot in this film is based around like it being Christmas and like the big coming together of everyone. They even like in the meeting mention Christmas, and the film keeps mentioning Christmas. Whereas Die Hard is just kind of in the background.
Are there any one-liners based around Christmas in this film?
Yeah, that one has ho ho ho. Now I have a machine gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, the thing is, I think Die Hard, it literally pretty much opens with the Run DMC like Christmas song, and like it's set at the Christmas party. He's coming home for Christmas, like in terms of I'm pretty sure it ends with a Christmas song as well.
Yep.
I think the whole, I mean, literally, someone tried to start the Die Hard Christmas debate in our work meeting the other day, and I was like, I'm not having this conversation.
You quit your job.
I'm not having this fucking conversation. It's a fucking Christmas movie. It ends here. We draw a line under it. I think, like, whereas here, I think it's more incidental. Like I say, I like it. I like that they bring it in at the beginning. It's almost like peace and goodwill to all men. That's why they're doing it on Christmas Eve and stuff like that. But really, it's mostly incidental. Christmas trees in the background. Feels like they've just gone, it's set at Christmas because we were shooting at Christmas and we didn't want to explain their Christmas trees in the background,
It's very atmospheric here.
Well, I feel like I'm being bullied now, so I'm going to just I'm going to walk away with my thoughts. Okay. Question time, gents. This is your second go at the knock list. Is The Package the true fairy tale of Chicago? Let's find out. That was a loose and tenuous connection to a Christmas song there, but let's go with Liam first. Yay or nay? Is The Package making the knock list?
I've got to ask some questions, but I mean, the knock list, right? Is the knock list meant to be the best of the best, or is it meant to just be is it good or bad kind of thing? Because if it's good, then I think fine, knock list. If it's meant to be the best of the best, like you'll make the knock list at the end of your podcast when you reach your final episode in 2035 or whatever that would be, and you go like, here is the knock list. Is the idea for it to be the creme de la creme of spy movies, or is that not the case?
It is the definitive list of the spy movies that people need to watch to really,
Then I don't think I can put this on the not list, because I don't think people need to watch this. I don't think this is definitive spy movie stuff. I think it is a good free stuff film. I think if you're into spy movies, certainly enough to start a spy podcast, then yes, by all means, watch this. You will enjoy it and you will have a good time. But I think if you're just like, hey, I can take or leave spy movie. I just want to see the absolute top 20 greatest spy movies of all time. This ain't going to be on the list. So I'm going to have to say no.
I think that's a fair answer. Although it doesn't really make sense that you said yes so vehemently to Men in Black International. But we won't dig into that.
That podcast is available, listeners. Go back and listen. See us consign it into the flames of the non-knock list. What the fuck?
I think we did. I think we actually did disavow it. It was that bad.
Yeah,
but,
disavowed.
That's it. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, of these types of films, these type of spy films, this type of films from the era, I think it's a completionist film. You know, it's perfectly fine, 3-star, possibly less than 3-star, depending on how kind you're being. But, you know, if you're a fan of this genre and you want to tick them all off, or you're doing all of Gene Hackman's films or Tommy Lee Jones's films, you know, it's going to be higher up than some, but I think it's very much for fans only. So knock list or naughty list? I mean, it's naughty list. Sorry.
It's getting a lump of coal this year. Sorry, Gene. Well, that's 2 no's. It is maybe still to play for, although a split vote is technically a no, I think. We decided a long time ago.
I should emphasise, I am not putting this on the naughty list. I'm putting this on no list.
Oh, it's not getting disavowed. It's not a bad film. It's just not the best.
Maybe, I tell you
fair.
what. Literally, you can have this in your Christmas stocking, but it isn't a main present. How's that?
Sure.
It's like the little puzzle you get, or it's like a tangerine.
Yeah. It's like a lot of Brussels sprout in your stocking.
It's a secret Santa for a work colleague you maybe don't know too
exactly,
well.
Exactly.
Yes. I was going to open this up by asking you about some secret Santa presents, but let's not get into it. Cam, what about you? Is it the best package you've ever had?
No. This is not a knock list movie, but this is sort of like a pulpy, you know, watch it late at night on streaming kind of movie. I would recommend it for that sort of thing if you're a spy fan and you like these kind of late 80s, early 90s, you know, political thrillers or action movies. And, you know, within like the works of Gene Hackman, it would not be on his knock list. It would not be on the Tommy Lee Jones knock list. There's a lot of people it would not be on the knock list for involved in this movie. So, yeah, for me, no, not quite, but it was fun to watch.
Well, there you go. That's 3 no's, so my vote is completely pointless. So I'm just going to go with my gut and what I want to say, and I think it should go on the knock list because at the age of almost 60, I want to be as active as Gene Hackman is in this film. I wish there was hope because my back hurts now and I'm in my mid-30s. Now, of course, it's not making the knock list. Even on like the list of the Christmas spy films we've done so far, I'd say this is probably my least favorite.
What are the other Christmas spy films you've done?
Well, On Her Majesty's Secret Service and The Long Kiss Goodnight.
A Long Kiss Goodnight. Yeah. I need to rewatch that.
But yeah, this is probably my least favorite of our Christmas films. But that's 4 no's. As such, the package is not making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both, Matt, Liam, the Spocklight lads, for coming on board, or 2/3 of the Spocklight podcast. Your second boldly going voyage on this podcast. Well, firstly, Matt, you've got 2 other shows that we sort of barely mentioned on here, except for Paul Dano. But like, where can people find you online and hear all your shows?
Yeah, no, it's been great to come back, guys. Thanks for having us and everything. And yeah, as well as Spocklight, you can hear me and my co-host Daryl on Is Paul Dano OK? We've got 4 full Dano seasons in the bag, including an episode on his guest appearance in The Sopranos with Liam, and of course his supporting term in Night and Day with you chaps. And we've got an extra bonus season on Judy Grier, which was our most recent season and first foray into other character actors, known as Griers, and we'll be back in the new year for season 6, which is a brief return back to Dano to soak up the rest of his films we've yet to cover. And me and Daryl are also across Daryl's OG show, which is Sudden Double Deep, which is the triple bill title podcast, where we look at 3 films that share a word in the title. So we pick out a word from a tin and find 3 films that share that word somewhere in the title, and try and get a range of films of different genres and different decades and different countries, if we can as well, to kind of go deep on some of those. So we try and pick maybe one that's a big obvious one that we can't not do, and then a couple of ones that are maybe more hidden gems. So that's over at SDD Film Podcast, and the Dano pod is Paul Dano OK at Is Paul Dano OK?
We'll put links to that in the show notes below, of course. And Liam, where can people find you online?
You can find me at Twitter, if Twitter still exists by the time this episode goes out, at Liam H. Dempsey on Twitter. Or obviously, you can find it at Spocklight, at Spocklight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can drop us a line on Gmail as well, spotlightpod@gmail.com. As I mentioned, someone did suggesting a Christmas movie, which we're actually going to do. So, contact us. It does work. And yeah, we've got some cool stuff coming up. By the time this episode comes out, we'll have our Star Trek Prodigy episode out with David Trumbull, who we mentioned earlier. Amazing story artist on films like Wendell and Wild for Netflix. He came on to give his animation expertise on Star Trek Prodigy, so that was really interesting. And also, we've got our Christmas special coming up, which I won't reveal here, but yeah, that'll probably be out around a similar time as this episode. So lots and lots of fun stuff to come.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and we'll see you out there on whatever's left of Twitter when this is all said and done.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Oh.
Well, Cam, all I wanted for Christmas was a spy film, and we had one. That was The Package, and what a lovely chat it was.
That's right. We have run out of puns regarding The Package, but nonetheless, it was an interesting journey along the way, and I'm glad we watched it.
Well, there you go, folks. That was our discussion on The Package. But don't forget, later this week, we have a chat with Mr. Andrew Davis, the director of this week's film, and of course, the director of other amazing action films such as Under Siege and The Fugitive. But Cam, the question goes to you, sir. What have we got coming up next week?
Yes, we have a real Christmas present. Scott and I are basically going to be off for the holidays, but that doesn't mean that the Spy Hards content is stopping. We are going to be releasing an interview we did with Colin Salmon, who played Robinson during the Brosnan Bond era.
Yes, indeed. We are super excited to bring you our chat with Mr. Colin Salmon, one of the leaders of the Brosnan era. So look out for that in your podcast feeds next week. And if you liked what you heard on the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. And do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SPYHARDS on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, Merry Christmas.